everyone is finished. I think. Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Winnie Uma, the Executive Director at ICA Foundation. Can you hear me? Please wave if you can hear me. Thank you. Welcome. I'm Winnie Ouma, the Executive Director at ICA Foundation Kenya. Yeah. And it's an honor to moderate this session on behalf of Yango Health Working Group. Thank you for being here, both physically and through online, and to engage in this dynamic and critical discussion on anticipatory action. A special thanks to the Resilience Hub for hosting, and to the co-organizers of this session, America's Education Cannot Wait, Ground Truth Solutions, International Center for Climate Change and Development, ICAD, and the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, UN OCHA. Today we are going to engage in a crucial topic of anticipating tomorrow, unlocking the potential of anticipatory action through multi-stakeholder collaboration. Please join me in welcoming our speakers who will discuss anticipatory action in diverse and impactful contexts. So from my far right hand, we have Elisa Schmidt. She's the program manager at Ground Truth Solutions. Please wave to the congregation, Elisa. Elisa is followed by Diana Nelson. Diana is the Chief of Education at Education Cannot Wait. And then she's followed by Lutfa Rahman, who is an early career researcher at ICAD, Bangladesh. And then we have Dr. Shafkat Munir Ahmad from Sustainable Development Policy Institute in Pakistan. And then we have Zinta Zomas, who is the lead in climate science and practice at UN OCHA. Before we start, I would like to welcome Wahia to perform for us. Wahia is an artist, and she's going to perform for us before we start the event. Thank you.
Kia ora, family, and welcome to this space. Firstly, my name is Faya. I am part of a Wisdom Keeper delegation, and I would just like to take this opportunity to come into our bodies and have a break from all of the mind work that we do. We get very tired and exhausted, and so I just invite you to drop into some sacred frequencies before we move into the work. Take a moment for ourselves. So as we are here today, I'd just like for us all just to take a big, deep breath, because we need it for the work that we do. Haramai te aka nui, haramai te aka roa. Haramai o ngā te ātua. O ngā ātua o ngā tapuai. O ngā ātua o ngā whenua. O ngā ātua o te rangi e o ngā pāpātua nuku. We acknowledge the sacred waters, the sacred land, our Earth Mother, our Sky Father, and everything in between. O te awa, o te moana, o pāpātua nuku e. Just invite you to close your eyes just for a second. I'm going to take you by the river. Take you by the sea. Take yourself into the forest. And to look into the future. For we are long gone. And we see our children sitting by that river, our children sitting by that ocean, our children sitting by those trees. The decisions that we make today, those decisions for those children tomorrow. Namahi, namahi, namahi aroha. Namahi, namahi, namahi o ngā tapoi. Namahi aroha o ngā tamarikima.
She has done an amazing performance. And thank you so much for bringing us to the session. All right. So each year the world is facing multiple and overlapping disasters, straining the humanitarian field's ability to respond and stretching the resources to the brink. At the same time, the commitment to early warnings for all and the investment in early warning systems has meant that partners can support vulnerable communities ahead of disaster by taking actions based on prediction, or if you like, anticipatory action, or AA. To fully realize AA's potential, cross-sector coordination is essential to create a truly holistic set of actions that addresses the varied needs of affected families and communities. With the right support, AA has the power to transform disaster response by equipping communities to act ahead of crisis, reducing the impacts of disasters, and also building resilience. Every other day, we see statistics about people affected by extreme weather events, and I know sometimes numbers can feel distant, just digits on a screen, until they hit home. And 6 months ago, the numbers hit home for me in the worst heartbreaking way when I lost my childhood friend Jane. We had grown up together, sharing dreams and secrets, but life took us down different paths, only to reconnect after college, still the same kids at heart. Losing Jane, especially after the recent loss of my mother, left me crushed. Kenya experienced extreme floods from March to May, displacing approximately 300,000 people and claiming 291 lives. The extreme rains battered the informal settlement where Jane lived. The walls of her home, which she trusted to hold her dreams of becoming a software engineer, could not withstand the force of the water. But I'm haunted by the question, what if something had been done earlier? What if those living in high-risk area like Jane's had been warned, evacuated, or given the slightest chance to survive? Maybe Jane and hundreds of thousands of people that we've lost through floods or any climate-related disaster could still be here with us today. And today, we are all potential victims of extreme weather events. The climate crisis affects us all, but not equal. Everywhere, women and girls face the greatest threats and harm. As a young leader working at the intersection of climate change and the rights of people with diverse sexual orientations, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics, or if we can call it SOGSC, I have witnessed how systemic exclusion, discrimination, and stigma has led to our needs being overlooked in climate discourse, especially in emergency settings. Anticipatory action gives us the opportunity to plan for everyone's safety and wellness ahead of disasters. It can help us ensure that vulnerable people are not only safe from the disaster, but also protected from gender-based violence and disruptions of essential services like health and education. For instance, providing essential health services, the gender-affirming health services to the transgender community during climate emergency is just as important as taking care of everyone else's safety and wellness during climate emergencies. We have to start looking at communities with an intersectional lens and practice inclusivity and intersectionality in our actions to ensure that truly no one is left behind. And this calls for a multi-sectorial approach to handling these diverse issues. It can only be possible if we work together. Allow me to say that our communities are already resilient. We've had the indigenous knowledge that has been passed down to us from generations to generations, helping us to predict and prepare for weather changes over time. And we are always the first people to respond when climate calamities strike. However, with today's rapidly shifting climate and the fast-growing technology, there is need to invest in early warning systems to better predict, prepare, and respond to climate crisis. And also that means a need for resources to be able to act sooner and more effectively for our communities. And so I urge funders in the room and those who are listening to us online to support and fund anticipatory action. I acknowledge that setting aside emergency grants or support is essential, but acting early before disaster strikes can save more lives, protect property, and preserve our future and planet. And without further ado, let's now turn to our speakers to now hear their valuable insights. And our first speaker is Mr. Provash, who is joining us remotely. And in 5 minutes, Mr. Provash is going to share with us insights of what early warning system at community level look like. You're welcome, Mr. Provash.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pravash Budden, and I lead AmeriCare's global humanitarian programs. I am joining you today from southern Spain, where apropos, there has been an early warning activated for intense rains that are occurring right now that close down schools, businesses as well. And these warnings were sent out by different channels, SMS, radio, etc. So just really interesting to connect this session of early warning systems to something that I'm experiencing right now in southern Spain. AmeriCares is a health-focused relief and development organization that responds to people affected by poverty and disaster with life-changing medical supplies, health services, and programs. Core to our emergency responses are our actions to help survivors access healthcare and recover their lives and those of their families and their communities. More and more, we are seeing devastating effects of climate change on communities in the forms of extreme weather, such as hurricanes, wildfires, and floods. Central America is one of the most disaster-prone regions in the world and also has limited resources for investments in disaster risk reduction, preparedness, and response. In climate-vulnerable communities, people have to take matters into their own hands. As we will see in the short video, the town of El Zonte on the southern coast of El Salvador is at the mouth of a river system that is prone to more flooding from increased rains and less protection of its riverbanks due to local deforestation. AmeriCares has helped this community establish an early warning system that strengthens ties with a neighboring community and enhances the reach of the Civil Protection Unit. This local effort of a last mile system extension of early warning plans is an example of what thousands of communities around the world are doing daily to adapt to the changes where they live, and doing so through extended collaborations with NGOs, local government, and local stakeholders. It's important for us in this room to support the efforts of community leaders so that they can strengthen preparedness plans that save lives and lessen the impact of disasters. This video is in Spanish with English subtitles. So I'll go to it just now, and thank you.
Yo vivo acá desde que nací. Las lluvias son más fuera de lo normal. En este punto donde nosotros nos encontramos, las inundaciones o el riesgo de las crecidas de ríos se da. Nosotros tenemos que estar prevenidos o estar alerta para poder tomar acción y prevenir un riesgo mayor o hasta una muerte por el deporte del río.
El río, recordemos, es un recurso, pero a través de la intervención del ser humano por la deforestación de los bosques ha causado de que los ríos salgan de sus cauces y puedan causar inundaciones en la zona. AmeriCares, a través de la investigación que hizo, pudo implementar un sistema de alerta temprana. Tratamos de involucrar siempre a la comunidad, trabajamos con los hospitales que son parte del sistema de salud y con protección civil, ¿verdad? Que es la entidad del gobierno que regula todo el tema de la gestión de riesgo.
Es muy importante trabajar juntos con ONGs como Americares o las alcaldías, con las comisiones comunales, porque como Dirección General de Protección Civil no se tienen fondos para obras de mitigación. Lo que nosotros necesitamos son observadores locales, que son ellos quienes hacen funcionar el sistema.
Es una señalización para nosotros estar bien ubicados con el otro señor que está de abajo, el don Julio, porque él es el sonte, ¿verdad? Nosotros nos comunicamos y así estamos en la comunicación. Cuando este río llena, que nosotros vemos que la altura la tiene ya alta, yo le comunico allá.
El programa Americas podría decir que es algo que está salvando vidas. Es más efectivo prevenir un siniestro, prevenir un riesgo, que estar lamentando después que murieron 10 personas en un deslave, murieron 5 personas ahogadas en el río del Sonte por cruzar cuando el río estaba crecido. Prevenir antes, no lamentarlo.
Thank you for joining me today. Have a good rest of your conference.
Thank you so much, Pravash. We've seen and heard that we have the problem of limited resources, yes, but also that is why I say that there's need to fund anticipatory action. And also, he has also called for collaboration and also supporting communities by building their capacities to be able to act more effectively. And so this will lead me to the next question that will go to Eliza Schmidt. What type of anticipatory assistance is most helpful from the community perspective? Please tell us in 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Winnie. And hi everyone. Nice to see you all here with us today. I'm Eliza. I work with Ground Truth Solutions. And we've been speaking with communities in Chad and in Nigeria about their thoughts of anticipatory action to understand how they can be better supported to act ahead of floods. And the first thing I would say is that, of course, generally people agree that taking action ahead of crisis is better than responding to them. This is absolutely critical. It's also common sense, I would say. The other thing I would mention is that although anticipatory action as a humanitarian program is quite new, and we are still trying to figure out exactly what that would look like, this is not a new thing for communities. They have already been responding ahead of crises for a long time and have a lot of knowledge and experience to share. So when we did our research in Chad, we spoke to communities living next to the Shari River, which experienced tremendous flooding this year, and they told us about all the systems they have in place to, one, forecast when floods will happen based on traditional and local knowledge, but also using meteorological data as a way to triangulate that information. That information is still not widely available enough, but it's being used anyway. And then also systems they have in place to mobilize the entire community to come together. When they know a flood is coming, they will mobilize, they will come together, they will build the flood barriers, they will collect sandbags together, and they will prepare to ensure that the impacts of floods are as minimal as they can be. And we also found that this is financed through multiple ways. You sometimes have community funds that are used for this. People also donate resources and their time as well. And so when we asked them, what kind of support would be helpful for you, what they said to us a lot is, what we need is support to strengthen what we're already doing. We already have these mechanisms in place. We have our hierarchies. We have our coordination structures. We need help to strengthen those so we can respond even faster is one of them. And the other as well is providing more access to meteorological data so we can triangulate with our own the own knowledge that we have, and then of course, we need more materials. Can we have more materials, like more sandbags, so that we can build even stronger flood barriers? Can we also, need more access to things like mosquito nets to prevent outbreaks of malaria afterwards? But I would like to add a caveat to this, which is that people need support to respond to floods consistently almost every year. And so when we look at anticipatory action programs right now that are triggered, based on a hazard of a certain magnitude, people are saying that's not enough, and they really want to see more support to allow them to respond more frequently to crises that may fall below the trigger for response, but that still wreak havoc on people's lives, especially in context with complex crises where people's ability to recover has a lot to do with, for example, the economic crisis happening right now. In Chad, for example, people have less resources, they have less access to food stocks, and so the impacts of floods will be a lot higher, even if they are a lot, smaller than what we'd expect. And so I think, it's really important to recognize that people have been doing this work for a long time and they have a lot to share. And when we talk about multi-stakeholder collaboration, that we need to start there and understand what's been working well at the community level and what are their suggestions for working well together. And I think one of the things that came out as well is that they want to be able to collaborate with organizations. And so they're saying, we could provide the information that's necessary to build something impactful at the local level. We can figure out together, okay, obviously you can't consult everybody. We know it's very difficult. You can't, consult every single person, but what system can we put in place to make sure that we are putting people first and actually developing something that will benefit people in the most effective way possible. So that's all I will share for now. But just that we will be publishing a report with all the reflections on what community has been saying about anticipatory action over the next few weeks. I'm happy to share more about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Elisa. Still, we can hear about the need for collaboration from community level to organizations coming together to work together, and also capacity building our communities, because they already have this knowledge with them. They're always the first responders. So all we need to do is to build their capacity of what they already have, and also provide more resources. And so my next question will go to Diana Nelson. Please, in 5 minutes, how can anticipatory action enhance resilience of education systems in crisis settings?
Thank you so much, Winnie. I'm pleased to be here on behalf of Education Cannot Wait. Maybe briefly about Education Cannot Wait for our colleagues that may not be familiar with the fund. ECW is a UN-based global fund for education in emergencies and protracted crises. It was established in 2016 to address the needs of children in protracted crises. Since then, we've raised $1 billion to support the most marginalized children, particularly girls. Some of the groups that have been raised here: girls, refugees, IDPs, children that are displaced by crises and war, or that are dealing with these issues every day. We did not coordinate with Lisa, but I want to pick back on your last point around resources and start perhaps with a call for action before I explain why the call for action is particularly important. And I think for us, the numbers tell us that anticipatory action is only 7% of the global funds for climate. That is a low number given the impact that it can have in terms of reducing the actual impact if we act after an emergency has happened. We need more funds to be able to go into anticipatory action so that we can address disasters ahead of time, mitigate the impact to communities that you've talked about, but also to make sure that we build back better. So why is that important, or how does that look like for us? In education, speaking from my point of view as an education actor, since 2022, 400 million children's education has been disrupted due to climate, extreme weather issues. The Education Cannot Wait Global Fund estimated that around 62 million children in protracted crises or in crisis areas have had their education disrupted since 2020. That's a lot of kids that are not attending school. This is just for children that are affected by climate. Now, we are talking about communities that are already dealing with a lot of other issues on top of that. So climate exacerbates all of this at a larger scale. In the lived experiences of kids in Kenya, in Pakistani, in Somalia, these things happen all at the same time. And it's really, really important for us to coordinate and work together to be able to not look at it in an isolated way, but to look at it holistically from the way communities, children, parents, mothers look at these things. The UN Organization for Food and Agriculture estimates that for every dollar you spend in anticipatory action, you actually save $7 for recovery that you could have used in recovery and response. And that is a powerful number to have, statistic to have. When we react after an emergency has happened, we are actually spending more money. My colleagues from Pakistan, I'm sure they will mention something around this. In 2022, Pakistani had floods that were unprecedented and had a damage of 24,000 schools that were destroyed due to flooding. That could have been prevented if we had acted earlier. I think for me, the key issue when it comes to education, it's not just around funding. We also have a knowledge gap. COP is one of the convening space for a lot of the climate actors, a lot of the skills that we have out there in the world, but we need to spread this out at education level beyond just the spaces that we all interact in. And starting early within the investing in education can really help us to be able to amplify that, but also to safeguard the learning issues for children that are dealing with already these issues at a large scale. The education sector spends $4 billion loses $4 billion in school damages for only cyclone-related climate shocks. Just cyclone, that's a lot of money. And then we rebuild again. So the issue is that we are addressing, we are dealing with the infrastructure from 19th century, 20th century to address 21st century problems, which is climate. We need to be smarter, we need to build better, and we need to do well by our children. I think Fire put it rightly in when you did your intervention, that for everything, the decisions we make today are for children. And that is true. Children are our future. I just want to talk about briefly what ECW is doing in terms of anticipatory action and also how the financing is looking for education sector. So we know that only 2.4% of climate funding is actually going to interventions that are targeted for children. Not just education, just in general children. We know that education is receiving only 4% of the global funds for humanitarian action. And those are huge gaps. On top of that, we are dealing with the climate issues that children, families continuously deal with. When schools were damaged or in Pakistan, during the flooding and there was a lot of displacement, the community, rightly so, chose to place families that were displaced into schools, which meant that children had to actually get out of schools to prioritize shelters for affected communities, as they should have done. But we need to be more creative in prepositioning and ensuring that when we know that the way we react, we find other ways to mitigate the risks of children that are not in those spaces, in those schools, so that their learning can continue over time. So we do have to, with the help of our partners, the government of Denmark, this year Education Cannot Wait announced $5 million dedicated to anticipatory action in Pakistan and Somalia. We are going to take a more dignified approach, which we work behind, and as Elisa has mentioned, we fundamentally believe that communities, parents, children hold the knowledge and expertise to address issues in a way that they've already been addressing. Within our pilots, parents and communities will be part of the discussions on what activities, small activities they can take and initiatives to mitigate some of the risks that they would have identified. This could look anything like sandbags, as you mentioned, that can be put in front of schools to reduce the risks. It could be identifying other alternative shelters for communities that are affected to reduce the disruption on learning, or it could be around identifying locations where school materials can be kept to reduce damages. We also, as part of those pilots, we are also going to be quantifying how much money is being saved by actually acting early, because I think quantifying that could help decision makers and policy makers to be able to not only invest in anticipatory action, but also to understand how much money we are saving by acting early. And I'll end on that note. Thank you so much, Winnie, for having me here. But I really hope that next COP, we will be able to see a change from the 0.7% allocation to anticipatory action to a higher number, so that we can reduce the impact of climate-related crises on children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana. Truly, still resources are needed to fund education, and also we can actually act early. When we act early, we can reduce the impact that is brought by the extreme weather events to our learners, so that education, which is very essential, is not disrupted. So allow me to go to the next speaker, Mr. Lutfa. As an early career researcher, what is your experience in working with community as an early career researcher in Bangladesh?
Thank you. Am I audible? So thank you here, and thank you all of the audience to be here. So it's great opportunity to share something, So let me let me try to bring out the issues from experience when I are here at COP29. So in my first section was COP29, is everybody is here because of the world toxic love affairs with the carbon dioxide and the planet. So we are all hates this relationship actually, and that's we are here because it's warm us, it wants to ruin us. So this is important to bring it here. So when I was in the first experience, when I was planned to come into the COP, so I am faces issues some badges, and then experience faces some accommodations and so many things. So that's I have to manage. So here the accommodation price increases. So that's why I have to share room with others. So this is one of the experience that I have faced. So, but this experience that I have faced and managed, this is I learned from my family, from my neighborhoods. But one of the big questions into my head, that is, if you want to tackle with climate change, so how much finance is needed, and what type of anticipatory actions we can take, because some issues we can manage by our family, neighborhoods, and our existing knowledge, but climate does not behave like this. So in our country, in my experience, what I'm working with my community, we have found that when we are working in the slum dwellers, in the informal settlements, I have found that they are facing some of the issues accessing basic services. But it's can manageable by the government. But they are also facing with the heat waves and heat stress. But how is it not possible by the government to tackle this? So it's something else. So the international community want to say that, okay, it can be happened by the urbanizations, or it just happened because of the human interventions. Then I researched in the community where there was no human intervention, one of the island, one of the coastal regions, but I found that they are facing salinity problem, salinity issues. So there was no human intervention there. That's actually happened because of sea level rise. So that's why they're also facing some of the issues, drinking water, So there are like so many others problems of the food security. But we are not sitting in an idle position. So in the slum dwellers, we are managing some of the issues by the NGO corporations and also the civil society. And people facing in the coastal regions, they are trying to they are trying to find out some solution of the rainwater harvesting, also saline tolerant seeds. Also in the cyclone and the floods, in the cyclone warning system, they are built in a cyclone shelter. And also the people who are displaced by the river erosion, the government take the initiatives for the relocation plan site. But when the disaster, the intensity of the disaster is higher, how can we manage? So like this, the infrastructure the government build for the coastal, for the storm surge or the flood, that is broken because the intensity is higher. And people, in the coastal regions, the women are working in the as a farmers, but they are not recognized. So the people, patriotic family doesn't recognize the family or the woman. So that's why something is needed from the behavioral change. So that's where we are talking about now the third adaptation, that is the research of transformational change or the transformational adaptation. We have already doing the coping, this is first adaptation, and then we are incrementing, that is infrastructure development or anything like this. But now we are working on the adaptational transformational adaptation. That will be takes time. That is behavioral change. So it's because, and also the managemental change, what we have existing resources. So one of the interesting findings we have found from the when we working in the river erosion people who are displaced, we have found that the people did not found the humanitarian assistance, emergency assistance at that time, but the government have allocation for that, but they don't have find in on time. So there is also different organization working on that. So there is a mismanagement or misgap into this, between this. So that's why we need to work in a whole of society approach, working with the research organization, working with the media, working with the social media, working with the research institute. So this is important. So when we are working in the whole of government approach, when this misinformation, and then we need to the whole of society approach to taking forward in the anticipatory actions. So it's really important to collaborate with the multi-stakeholder to going forward. Thank you. I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Lutfa. I agree that we still need more studies to help us learn about effective anticipatory approaches and also to help us understand what's going on in the community. And we still need to work together, still calling for multi-sectorial approach to be able to implement AA successfully. So my next question would go to Dr. Shafkat Munir Ahmad. In 5 minutes, why is integrated approach to anticipatory action critical? You're welcome.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think the speaker earlier have set the scene for anticipatory actions. Now the multidisciplinary approaches are essential because when we are preparing ahead of a disaster, my experience is that we do not have a plan taking communities into mind, their indigenous knowledge, their indigenous coping mechanism. What we do actually is that we do something just in a reactive mode. So we have to come out of the reactive mode. We need to be in the proactive mode. Only then we can do two things, which are essential part of the anticipatory action: the pre-planned or the pre-agreed planning and pre-agreed finance. Otherwise, we can be, and DRR approaches we have been using earlier. And then we have added that we are anticipating now, just not in a reactive mode. So when we are anticipating, then certainly we need a multidisciplinary approach because, when you are doing a pre-planning and you have to arrange pre-finance and pre-cash for action save themselves with their knowledge, but added kind of a support to save themselves and reallocate everything and evacuate. So for that we need the finance departments of the governments, We need local governments in it, involved in planning. They should have a local contingency funding, local contingency plans. Only then they can have a full-fledged anticipatory action. In Pakistan's case, Diana rightly mentioned that this time these schools could not be either rebuilt or started immediately, even not in the temporary phases, because the water was standing for months and months. If I compare the 22 flood in Pakistan with 2010 flood, there is a huge gap of understanding and planning in both, because the 2010 flood was a northern riverian flood, and people know how to anticipate which sort of cusic water is coming up. Communities were trained, but they could have managed the water route and everything. But in 2022, it was because of a climate hazard, because of the locally generated weather situation in southern parts of Pakistan, and that really, and there was a heavy rains, continuous heavy rain, that put people in the water for months and months. And there are two lakes in the south side, which lake, Hamal Lake and Manchar Lake. There are two lakes. In between there is 100-kilometer distance. But there was no distance at all. There was water everywhere. All the two lakes were merged together. So in that way, schools, hospitals, all kind of things gone, and people's life and livelihood were destroyed. Now what the government is thinking, and of course I will give you a little bit on the regional context also. In South Asia, my colleagues from Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, they have already working on the anticipatory framework. And that framework which I am just talking about, the gaps, the riverine flood and the climate related floods, both have different kind of requirements. Now these frameworks are looking at with the future angle. Even the meteorological things are become part of this thing. Meteorology department, finance department, disaster department, and all, any education, agriculture, health, they are joining hands so that under a framework they can have a really anticipatory action by all. Those who are responsible for providing the fund, they should give the fund. Those who have to plan for the agriculture to save livelihood part of the people, and particularly Pakistan is among the 5-10 countries which is rich in livestock and agriculture. So that's why these kind of things are necessary in a multidisciplinary approach which you just mentioned. More of it, Pakistan is prone to all kind of weather, extreme weathers and disasters. For example, heat waves. The incidence of heat waves have increased 3 times now in Pakistan, which are killing more people. If you are doing preparation or anticipatory action for floods, flash floods, urban flooding, all these, then how can you, ignore the heat wave? Then we have gulfs in Pakistan. We have mountains. We have glaciers. Glaciers are also coming up in a dangerous situation. And similarly, we have prone to earthquake as well. Pakistan has saw, I think, the massive earthquake in Kashmir in 2005. So that kind of experience in Pakistan is that we have ultimately a program backed by resources through an anticipatory approaches, and that is what our National Disaster Management Authority is doing. Myself and my team is supporting the government's disaster management body. And in fact, one of my researchers is placed with the government's body so that we can work together with the government for developing a framework which is needed under this context and the analysis which I mentioned. Since this is a very small time, so I'll stop here. If there will be any question, I'll come back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shafkat. I would like to give every speaker 30 seconds or less to just tell us one call to action before we go to our last speaker, who will close the meeting with her last remarks. So every speaker, please, one call to action in 30 seconds or less.
Thanks so much, Winnie. From my side, I think the call to action is really putting communities at the center, remembering that they have expertise and knowledge to share, and that they are essential to developing anticipatory action programs that are effective and that are sustainable and can really help people cope with the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Winnie. I think I said mine at the beginning, but it's really financing. This education sector is predominantly underfunded. If we think about the intersectionality of needs that are children's needs that are affected by crisis, looking at vulnerable groups, whether it's IDPs, whether it's refugees, whether it's girls, whether it's LGBTQ, these things are happening at the same time. So we really need to inject more financing in anticipatory action and education as a sector as a whole to address a lot of the issues that are happening and the effects of climate change on children and their well-being.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, in my opinions, I think it's important to the humanitarian assistance or the addressing the loss and damage for the displacement. So, humanitarian assistance is needed for the community who are displaced or something like this, and then it's very important to address them because they don't have the access any other things from the any other organization. So it's really important of the humanitarian assistance for the displaced person. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think if you look at anticipatory action in the overall architecture of resilience, and of course the climate change, climate justice, then I understand that this is the issue of haves and have-nots. Communities are having nothing. They don't have resources. They don't have expertise or technical things which, how they can support themselves and protect themselves. That's why we need to understand that it is the matter of a class issue. We should understand that the community level people, if the anticipatory action is not community led, is not community empowered, then certainly we will be lacking something.
You hear me? Okay. Yeah. Before I invite our next speaker, who will be giving us our closing remarks, I would like to invite our cartoonist who was capturing the event to show us what they have captured. Just in a minute or less, please. Our cartoonist. Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Just quickly going to congratulate all the speakers for a very charged up and a very insightful session. Thanks all. Here are the cartoons. For the sake of everybody's convenience, I'm going to read out the captions. The first one, the problem isn't being a disaster-prone city. The problem is being a design disaster. Here's the second one. It's a homogeneous scale, but the severity differs on the basis of gender, geography, ethnicity, age, race, economy, and so on. The third one, just to highlight how climate change impacts different regions of the globe differently. A kid from the global north, I had to skip school to protest climate change. A kid from the global south, my school drowned because of climate change. And the final one, just to end it on a positive note, what the effective implementation of anticipatory action in communities may look like. I think the visual is self-explanatory. Thanks a lot, everyone. And thank you for making me a part of this.
Thank you so much. That is so much interesting. We can clap for the cartoonist for doing such an amazing job. Okay, so please welcome me in. Join me in welcoming Zinta Zomas. She's the lead in climate science and practice at UN OCHA, and she's going to tell us how UN OCHA can amplify these efforts and how would an integrated approach help people on the ground and more. You're welcome.
Great. Thank you very much for having me join this very interesting discussion. I'll briefly, to wrap up, highlight the ways that OCHA has been trying to address some of the design disaster that was highlighted in the cartoon just now. Over the past 5 years, OCHA has really tried to step up to fill that financing gap that was mentioned. To explain, OCHA is the UN the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. That means that we coordinate humanitarian response for the UN, and we also manage some of the funds, the humanitarian funds that are used for response. And as of 2023, OCHA's Central Emergency Response Fund provided 50% of all prearranged financing. So it was a really critical fund in helping scale up anticipatory action. And right now, actually, we have over $108 million of funding that is designed to support 4 million people in 17 countries to assist them to take anticipatory action ahead of shocks. But clearly that's not enough. 17 countries is nothing when you compare the number of parties that we have participating here. So we need to really scale more. And, what can we do? How do we scale? How can we scale? Well, one is we obviously need more finance, as was mentioned, not just from the Central Emergency Response Fund, but from other funds to contribute to anticipatory action. To do that, though, one of the challenges is that when we pre-allocate financing and we commit to act ahead, we also need to make sure we have enough money left over to take action for unexpected shocks, such as earthquakes or conflicts. So we're looking at how can we innovate to also get the private sector involved, for example, by developing, insuring some of the funds so that if we give money for floods that are taking place right now in Bangladesh or in Chad or in Nepal, that we also have enough money left over for other emergencies. So looking at how innovative financing mechanisms that also contribute to anticipatory action. That's one thing that we're looking at right now. The other thing that we're looking at is a lot of our anticipatory action has looked at only one shock. So for example, floods or droughts or cholera. But as was mentioned by the panelists here, people are facing multiple shocks, often all at once. So can we design anticipatory action frameworks that address both floods and cholera? How do we do that? How do we speak to the multiple risks that individuals are facing? And then the third thing that we're looking at is really how do we work with governments and local communities, both to design the programming that's offered, but also then to reach that scale, because the humanitarian sector can't do it alone. We need to work with governments and to pair our activities with social protection systems that governments manage. And so we're working in places such as Fiji and in Bangladesh to look at how do we build on the social safety nets. So I'd like to end it there and just to say that, I think your key messages are critical about working with communities. How do we finance and how do we really work together better, humanitarian, government, and the climate sector. And hopefully next year at COP, we can report on yet further progress in this area. So thank you.
So as we come to the end of the session, let's welcome Fire to close for us the session again. Yeah.
Thank you. We'd just like to sit here, as we sit here, to ring the bell for action. We ring this bell for the healing of those who have been affected by our climate change. We ring the bell for those children who are in suffering due to climate change. We ring the bell for the visionaries to step forward and bring those solutions that we so desperately need. We ring the bell for the future that we all dream of, and for those in power to take action. We ring the bell for healing. generational healing, environmental healing. Namahi, namahi aroha.
Much fire, and I think we've come to the end of the session, so we can leave at our own liking. Thank you so much for joining us today.